Dear oh dear, what's all the smoke from? Oh my goodness. What's going on? Oh no. What have I done? I'm in trouble. Well, it's been a while, but I'm going to start doing some work on the Inter again. Stop the video. And just don't get a push so that doesn't steer from this end. Yeah. And the front door, we just sweep the corner over there, right? Yeah, look at the space. I'd like to thank my assistant for pushing. Look at those muscles, eh? It was all Davina. Look at all this space. Got a dance floor. Got to fill it within minutes. Well, I figured I might tell you a little bit about this truck behind me. I've actually had it for close on a couple of years, and some of you might have seen the earlier videos of when I dragged it home and I did some work to it, but I haven't really touched it other than putting some running boards on it for about over a year, probably about a year. So let's have a walk around it and I'll show you what it is. So what the cab is a 1952 International L120. Now I don't claim to be an expert on these, but what I do understand is that they come in various sizes, as in 1 ton, 1.5, 2, 3 ton, whatever. Don't quote me on those sizes. But this was a small truck. So this was, I believe, a 1 ton truck in the first place. So it's got small wheel openings at the front. The larger trucks have big wheel openings, and sometimes that can look a bit funny when you build a truck on a smaller chassis, which is what I'm doing here. So I was lucky when I managed to find it with this. But let's go back a step. The reason I started building this truck in the first place was that I saw a Holden HJ chassis for sale, and it was a full chassis with a 253, so 4.2 litre Holden V8, and a Trimatic transmission, and it had even actually had a radiator in it, not this one, but it had a radiator. It was just the chassis. It had, when I say just the chassis, it didn't have a body. It did have a fuel tank, I think. Can't remember, maybe I got that. It had rear suspension, a 10-bolt Salisbury rear end, which is a good thing, all the brakes, and even an added bonus of having power steering. So it's not a bad thing at all. So I found that and I thought, look, a running chassis, how can I go wrong? I will find a body and put it on there. So that's how it started. I bought the chassis with the intention of actually building a truck. And then I found a truck, and I happened to find this one. I didn't really care what I picked up. I've previously built Toxic, my 52 Chev, in the same way that I built this. And I happened to come across this International chassis, and it was on the other end of the earth. So I had to go way down south, New South Wales, to pick up the chassis, and I came a reasonable way up north to pick up the body. As it turns out, I now live only maybe 30 minutes away from where I got the body from. The body came from Broken Hill originally, and it's even got some sign writing here, and it says something like Geo Wellington 241 Oxide Street, Broken Hill, and then there's a bit of a phone number or something there, I think. So that's pretty cool. It's only on one door, so that is going to, if I leave the truck in patina, which I'm open to your words, then that door's going to stay there. But I did pick up another door off a guy that hasn't got any sign writing on it, so that if I do decide to paint the truck, then it means that I can keep that door and hang it up on the wall, because I love old sign writing. The guards have been put into epoxy at some stage. They're in pretty good nick. Got a little bit of damage here and there. This one's got a little bit of a bend. It's a bit hard to film on this side. It's got a little bit of a bend on it, but overall they're good. So they've already been epoxied. I'll probably do those satin black, because rather than try and fake the patina, I think I'll just do them satin black. And I also replaced the grille. I got the grille with the truck, but the grille was this one up here, and I have since done some work on it, straight. It was all pretty knocked around and so on. That's it up there, and I got it pretty good, but then the guy that I bought the door off, he actually had a whole cab, which I wish I had bought. Didn't have the room at the time, but I bought this off him because this thing is in really good nick. The biggest difference I can see is that this is just black, the bars here. It's got all of them. My other one didn't have all of them, whereas the other one did have the chrome, and the bumper bar notches. The notches where the bumper bar goes, just here, are deeper than on this guy. So I didn't really pay that much attention when I looked at it, but I suspect that this might have been a bigger truck. But in most ways it's similar. I think maybe the 1-tonner was had a little more detail, as in the chrome bar slats and so on, but it looks pretty good. So I don't think I had to do anything to that to put it on there to make it look good. Anyway, the little details about these things. It's got these side opening bonnets, or hoods, whatever you want to call them. So it's got these latches down here on each side, and you've got a handle that you can unlock the latch, and then you can either swing it left or right, or if you open both of them, you can lift the whole hood off. And then it's got a stay that holds it up. I haven't got that functioning properly yet, because I put the front panels on and it's not on the original chassis. As I said, it's on a Holden chassis. I haven't really got everything dialed away properly to be able to get those hinges to line up on the correct plane so that it latches and opens, and hopefully I will, because that is a pretty cool feature. And on that, I had to take one of the latches off when I fitted up the brake booster and master cylinder, which is off the Holden, and so I'm going to have to modify that, probably move it this way, but to get it to work. That's all finer detail for later. So what have I done so far? I've done some rust repair, and it was sort of in this order. I've done some rust repair, so it was rusted out through here on both sides. So I made some panel that went up here, replaced a couple of the layers of steel there. Haven't quite finished it on either side. Again, it was a while back. I just put it in red primer after I did it, and I will do a little bit of patina to blend it in, but I think the red primer sort of blends with the theme anyway. This truck cab has been painted by someone with a paintbrush at some stage, probably with house paint or something like that. It's all flaky and all the rest of it, and I love it. I really like it. Call me crazy, but I actually really like that sort of thing. It's got all this crack-a-leak sort of effect going on here. That's a folk art term, if you're not aware. Yeah, I think it's a good thing, but it's got these dual back windows, which is cool. It's got most of the interior, which was pretty minimal to start off with, so that wasn't hard. This door has a fatigue in it here, so if I run with this door, then I'll have to fix that. But some little things with these. All the windows and everything don't work at the moment, but the quarter window swings like a quarter window. It is broken. And the track, when you wind the window up, the track for the quarter window actually comes up with the glass. So when you've got the window down and the quarter window there, you've actually got like a frameless opening, which is a nice little touch. Got these sort of Art Deco handles and stuff. It had the gauges, and while I don't usually use old gauges, I may try and adapt it so that I do use those. The surround around the windscreen here, pretty rusted out, but again, when I bought the panels off the other guy, I managed to get some really good pieces, so very carefully just thrown on the seat there. So regarding the seat, again, this is all in previous videos, guys, if you're interested. This is a seat out of an XG Falcon Ute. It's a split bucket bench. I've got the same sort of thing in Toxic, but I took headrests off it and had it trimmed in leather and suede. So very good thing. So I've got that mounted. It's on its slides and everything. That was pretty simple. Just made up some mounts through here. I'm not going to go through all the detail here. As I said, there's some videos, so some of my earliest videos, and they're not great videos, but if you're interested, the info is there. I've got a column shift auto Holden steering column, H, Q, J, X, Z, Z, not really sure. And I've adapted the proper breakaway mounts and everything that will be required for engineering. And again, there's a video on that. And I've got the Holden brake pedal. I've got the Holden accelerator pedal, which is just here, which I've got to adapt. And as you can see, there's various things, mirrors and sun visors and things, which I may or may not use. The only thing I've done to this truck since I've been at this new location is I fitted the running boards and I welded brackets that I fabricated to the chassis, so they're all in place. I just the other day, and this will be probably in this video, it's a bit out of sequence, put this master cylinder on. Bought that a few months back, hadn't got around to it. But this is the Holden booster, Holden master cylinder, Holden steering column, Holden suspension, brakes, motor, etc. So this is really a HJ Holden V8, Trimatic, 10-bolt diff, disc brake front end, drum rear end, with an international cab mounted on top of it. So it is the perfect example of a rebody, which is how it will be referred to on the engineering papers. And if you're wondering, this will be registered, insured, driven as a rebodied HJ Holden 1-tonner. It won't be registered as an international. And that is because of the chassis that it's on. That's what it will be registered as. It will need to comply, I'm in New South Wales, it will need to comply with all of the Australian design rules that apply to the year and month of the chassis, which, seem to remember, it might be April 1976, early in the Australian design rules, but there are some, so I'll need to comply with those. And that'll be things like having a heated demister, 2-speed wipers, burst-proof door latches, and meeting the emissions of the actual engine. And coming to the engine, I've since discovered it's actually a Commodore motor. So it is out of a later model car than what the chassis was. While these chassis came out with a 253 or a 308, which is a 5-litre, this motor is actually out of a Commodore. And I think it's probably out of a Commodore just like that, which is an 82 model. So it'll need to comply with the emissions of that, which isn't too much. I think it'll be a charcoal canister. The appropriate pollution gear on the carburetor and stuff like that. So let's have a look underneath. So I need to be pretty clear that everything is still in the mock-up stage. So I'm sort of getting it fully functional, getting it all good, concept proven, and then I'll pull it all apart and detail it all up, clean it, and do all that sort of stuff. But how have I got it mounted? And again, there's a series of 3 videos on this, so I'll just skim over it. Basically, the big fat member down the bottom here, that is the Holden chassis, and then that is the body up there, and this here is a subframe that I've made. So there's brackets that sit on the original Holden rubber mounts, and then there's subframe rails, which I'll show you underneath. Let's look over the other side. So that's the bracket. Then there's subframe rails, which are 70 by 50, I think it's 5mm walled rectangular hollow section. So they come along, and then they pick up the rear mounts on the Holden chassis. Very, very minor modification required to the chassis. I just had to take the top off this part here, it's a bit hard to see, which is the cross member. I think I took about 20-30mm off the top of that just to get the body to the height where I wanted. I could have mounted it without doing that, but it just gave me a little bit more low. And then there's just a cross brace. I've picked up the Holden, the International mounts here, and a bit of triangular gusseting. It's basically all just out of angle iron and box section. And then I've got these little outriggers here that come off the chassis rails that then go through and pick up some of the original mounting points onto the cab once again on the cab cross member. Pretty simple, really very simple. I mounted my Chev in much the same way, but obviously the body was a bit different on the Chev. So the only thing that I have yet to finish is these brackets here. So we'll show you from a different height what I'm doing there. But before I put the vehicle back down, you can see it is just a standard Holden underneath with a subframe mounted on top of it with a cab mounted to that. I've got to work out my shift linkages, and that's a little bit of a snafu for me, to be honest. I put this column shift in it, sorry, the steering column with the column shift auto mechanism, so that I could easily just use Holden column shift mechanism to go to my box. I've just hit my head twice now. But the problem is that the Commodore has the shift mechanism on the left hand side, whereas the Holden, the early Holden, J, Q and so on, the Trimatic box would have the mechanism on the right hand side. So the factory column shift rods and everything that I've got, linkages that I've got, don't connect to this in the straightforward way that I was hoping. So I'm either going to put a red motor, which is what this would have had in it originally, a red motor transmission in it with the shift on this side, or probably work out a cable setup. I want it to be straightforward, and I want it to be, you can just pretty much replace parts easily without too much mucking around and refabricating of things. So we'll see how that goes. So that was a bit of a thing. So that's where I'm at with that. As far as that goes, all I really need to do, other than blocking off those transmission cooler pipes, all I really need to do is work out some shift linkages for this, and I believe I could drive it. I've actually got the brakes sorted, I think, after putting that master cylinder on. But yeah, other than the shift linkage, I'm pretty sure I could get in this thing and drive it around. So that's pretty cool. So what was I going to do? That's right, I'm going to lower it down and show you the rest of the mounts. Before I do, just here, I've had to cut out sections of the inner guards from the International. When I do this sort of thing, I like to use as much of the original stuff from whichever car as I can. So the inner guard is off the International, and I've had to cut it here for the subframe, I've had to cut it around here for the control arms, and I've had to clearance it here for the chassis. Slightly different on one side to the other, just because of the design of either vehicle. So didn't have to clearance it at the front on the passenger side. but I got the control arm clearance, the chassis clearance. Again, I like to try and do it as neatly as I can so that to the knowing person, it might just look factory. So the radiator, I actually have tried to use some of the original radiator mount and adapt it to some to the body and the chassis with parts that I've fabricated. Once again, there's videos on that. So I think it all works pretty well. Let's have a look at the rear mounts. Before I get to the mounts, once again on the theme of trying to keep it simple, got the original Holden 1-tonner fuel tank, filler neck and so on. On Toxic I made a tub rear end. On this International I think I'm going to make a flat tray, but it'll probably be something a bit interesting, like they do on the Holden 1-tonners quite often. Might have the wheels coming up through the tray, the guards coming up through the tray, and maybe a nice flat timber tray with you know, just a steel perimeter, box section steel perimeter, something pretty simple, but I want tie down points. There's no point having a commercial vehicle that isn't practical. Regarding the rear cap mounts, these Holden 1-tonner chassis, how they work is that the cab is like that, but obviously the Holden cab, and then you've got the chassis. And the design of these is that this mount just here bolts into the back of the Holden 1-tonner cab so that it becomes part of the bracing. So the cab actually is a bracing component for the chassis. So it would be very easy just to pop the cab on to the chassis and not worry about that. But this point here is potentially a weakness if you do that. So what I've done, and again they're still part way through the process, this one's nearly complete, I've just made up using various pieces of scrap metal this part here, which will eventually be welded onto the subframe. It's just sitting there at the moment. It'll be welded and it picks up this. So there's the original Holden rubber mounts here, and there's a rubber mount in there and a bolt that comes through. So it triangulates this bracing plate that's on the 1-tonner into this to take it through to the subframe. So rather than mount this into the back of the cab, I've mounted it into the subframe to give that triangulation effect. On Toxic, my Chev, I actually made up a mount that's very similar to the Holden 1-tonner that goes onto the back of the cab, and it works. It's strong. It's actually really rigid and handles fantastically, but it squeaks. It squeaks in the cab just a little bit, and while it's not terrible, it annoys me. So I'd prefer that not to happen. Don't get me wrong, these cars, they have rattles, they have squeaks, that's just what they are. But the less rattles and squeaks I can have, the better it is, the more enjoyable the journey is. But it is an old car. So yeah, pretty simple. Just goes onto either side of the chassis rail, or the subframe rail I should say. Comes up, got a nice thick plate, comes out here, then it comes through and it's all triangular gusseted. Basically all just scrap metal that I cobbled together. Be welded, painted, become part of that subframe. And the idea is that you'll be able to unbolt the cab by 2 original mounting point bolts at the back. I think there's about 12 bolts at the front, which is crazy. And then if you wanted to lift the whole thing off with the front end, the guards, bonnet, grille and everything, then it's a matter of slipping the radiator out, and down there in the middle of the picture, that's the braces that sit on top of the front of the Holden chassis, rubber mounted using the Holden original rubber mounts. So you can unbolt all of the front panels with those 2 bolts, the ones that are on the outriggers through the middle of the cab, the bolts at the back of the cab, and those last ones that I showed you here. And you can pick the whole cab up and have to disconnect the steering and the brakes obviously. Pick the whole cab up, lift it off, sit it to the side, and have the chassis there. That's the stage that I intend to get this thing to before I go through and start detailing it up to look beautiful. So in a nutshell, I need to finish these. This one is a little further along than the other one. I've just basically got to finish some of the gusset welding, box in the top of it, box in the top, finish the gusset welding, clean it up, and I'll sandblast those and then pop them in place and weld them in place. And once they're done and I've sorted out the shifter mechanism, then I'll be confident that this thing is rigidly mounted and drivable. Finished? No. Drivable? Yes. Beautiful? That's in the eyes of the beholder. I've got my list over here. There's a couple of things that I'll point out in later videos as well. But I got this, so I want to go through, do my auto shifter, work out how I'm doing it, put throttle pedal in. I need to do that too. Brakes, discs. So I've got all new brake and steering components for this, but the only thing that I've put in at the moment is the master cylinder, and I'll worry about the other stuff after I've got the concept all working, and it'll be part of the beauty project of replacing all of that. And I'll paint the control arms and everything will look smick. There was and is still a crack in the chassis, pretty common on these. There was a couple which I've repaired, I've plated, ground out, V-jointed, made it all good, but there's still one that I need to fix, and I'll show you that when that time comes. Got to sort out the bonnet. I've got to replace some door latches, as in they've got to be burst proof. I put Toyota Hilux into the Chev. It really doesn't matter what you use, as long as they are burst proof 2-stage latches. Sort out what I'm doing with the gauges and the electricals generally. A little bit of rust still in the front of the doors. Sorry, the front guards where I pointed before. Got to sort out a battery train. I've actually got one hanging around that was out of Sam's GMC, which is beside me. It was a spare one because it had 2 batteries, so I'll probably try and just grab that and adapt it. Got to put some rubbers on the fuel tank straps, rebuild the column, put a transcooler, sort something out with the wipers. I actually used mini wipers in the Chev, in Toxic. They're cable operated, really easy to use. You can get hot rod type things the same. Some people use Commodore or whatever. It doesn't really matter what you use, but the easier the better, and it's good for spare parts. Whenever I build anything, if I can, I try and get it so that if something breaks, I can go to a spare parts shop or go onto eBay or whatever and pick up the necessary parts. Washers, that'll be easy. Demister, that's always a bit of a conundrum. I've got a hot rod heater in the Chev and it works, but it's terribly noisy and isn't super functional, but it passed registration muster. So I might try and find something better than that. Got to sort out some seat belts, and there's always the seat belt mountings that you've got to contend with. The floor's generally pretty easy. You can put some good sized plates there. Normally I think it's 50 by 75 mil plates with captive nuts. No drama. It's usually the upper mount of the inertia reel seat belts that sometimes you've got to brace up the cab, so we'll sort that out. Got to have an exhaust fitted. Never built an exhaust, so maybe today's the time. Not today, maybe this build's the time. As I said, I'll probably go with a tray. I see them for sale sometimes for 1-tonners, so I may go the slack route, and if I see one, just buy it or make it, whatever works out faster and cheaper. Got to sort out all the ancillary stuff like making the windows wind up and down. Glass, I'll need to get new windscreen glass made. My engineer is happy if the glass has safety glass. If it is safety glass on the side and rear windows, he's okay with it. But the windscreen's got to be laminated. It's flat glass, it won't be hard, it won't be expensive. Have no idea whether I can get seals for it, so we'll sort that out. The seals on this are shot, so I may have to try and find a generic seal. My glass guy, which is Glass for Classics in Nerang, Queensland, Nathan, g'day Nathan, he may have seals, haven't pursued that at all, or I may do something a bit different and urethane them in like modern glass, so we'll see. Handbrake, so this vehicle, this truck actually has the original handbrake lever, which is pretty cool, I like it, and I'm going to adapt that to the original Holden handbrake cable setup. I don't think that'll be a problem. And yeah, there's probably a million other things that I need to sort out along the way. So, and when it comes to the tray, I'll use the original mounting points. I think there's 6 of them in total. use those, and that's where the tray will go. Not going to overcomplicate that part. So that's a rundown on that. And this is a lot of the steering and suspension components that I've had for a good year and a half. So I guess I should do something. I've prolonged for too long. Oh, and I have had this thing running. This is my Fire in the Hole 3000. Basically, it hot wires the vehicle for me. Got it connected to the starter, the coil, and I connect it to a battery, wind it over, and it makes it go. So there's a video on that too. Video on everything that I've done to this so far. So if you're interested, go back and have a look, because there's no point me repeating everything. While they're not great videos, as I said, they are videos and they are there. So I should do something. I think what I might like to do is I'll probably play around with those mounts at the back a bit, just finish those off. But because I actually want to get this thing running and driving, and I've got it on the hoist, which I've never had the opportunity to do before, I might be able to get it started and running and just sort of ticking over and jump underneath and manually put it into, you know, the gears, because I don't know whether the transmission works and I don't know if the diff's any good. So if I can sort that out, that'd be nice to be able to see that the transmission actually works and so on. Actually, as I'm thinking about it, it hasn't got a speedo cable in it. Might need to plug that so I don't get fluid going everywhere. In fact, having said that, I don't even know if it's got fluid in it. Don't even know if it's got diff oil. Might be a good idea to check those things. I'm rambling. I think we'll go down that path. Okay, stick with me. Righto, well, Sam had this spare battery tray off his GMC, and I'm going to adapt it onto the firewall of this. So I'm actually going to make this even easier on myself. Rather than make up a flange to go back to here, I'm literally just going to get this part of the bracket and bend it back this way so it's on the same angle as that part of the firewall. So if I just sit my sliding bevel there like that and tighten it up, then I will have the angle that I need to transfer it back. It's a bit hard to tighten it one-handed, but you get the idea. So I'll tighten it off at about that angle. Then I can remove the battery tray, go and bend that tab at that angle, put it in, should fit, should. So, riv nut. This part here, that is the riv nut. So, it is a rivet nut. So, there's a particular tool that I'll use in a minute and I'll show you, but this goes in and it's got a thread inside it. Once this is fixed into the firewall, then I'll be able to get a bolt. It is metric. I don't have any Imperial riv nuts, which this is an Imperial truck, so I don't normally like to mix and match, but hey. So then that can go in there. So what it is a captive nut. Now you can weld nuts on there and all that sort of stuff, and sometimes I'll make a plate and put a nut on the back and then epoxy the plate onto the back so that it disperses the weight and so on. I don't think it's necessary with this. It seems to distribute the weight pretty well anyway, just with the design of the battery box. So I'll drill the right size hole, which I think is about 12.5 mil, and then we'll put the riv nut in. Just drilled a pilot hole first so that I could locate the hole properly. you do want to be sure of is not to make the hole too big. There goes my light. Okay, or too small. I'll just enlarge that a little bit. Okay, I enlarged the hole, got the riv nut just sitting in there, so I'm just going to tap it in. You can normally just push it in, but the hole's tight, so that's good. So that just flanges there. Now, what I do is get the riv nut tool, this thing here, and you screw this in, and then like a rivet gun, you pull the handles back, and it flares the other end out, mushrooms it. Put that in there, rotate that. It'll pull the handles out a bit. Get going as far as I can. Okay, I just pull this, and unlike a rivet, it's not going to snap off at the end. I just stop when it's tight. Not going to go any further than that. Undo this. I now have a captive thread. Let's have a look up close. So we now have a captive thread in the firewall, which I can go through and screw a bolt into. Screw a bolt into. So all I need to do now is put the battery tray up, and I'll put captive nuts on the upper side as well, where the tech screws are. There we have it mounted. Okay, let's get it up and we'll have a look underneath and connect that big fat power cable there onto the starter motor. What on earth have we got going on here then? We have a pre-Christmas photo shoot going on.
For all the models. Yeah, that's a good view.
I could probably be assisting, but it's more fun actually just watching this. While we're up in the air, I might as well check the diff oil level. Oil runs out, we've got plenty. And if it doesn't, oh, yeah, there's plenty. It even looks clean. Smells like diff oil. Okay, that is actually really clean looking oil. I don't think I replaced that. I don't remember replacing it. Maybe someone did it not long before it was taken off the road. So that's the oil on the floor just there. That's like brand new. That's good. Nothing like the smell of diff oil. It stinks. No, that was quick. Just got to plug up the hole for the speedo, I guess. Where the speedo cable goes in the side there, just here. I just need to plug that with something. Is that it? That's not it. No, sorry, that's not it. Oh, if I look, that's it there. I need to lock that, and in fact you can see the speedo drive just inside there. So I haven't got a speedo cable, so I'll just find something that goes in there just to stop fluid spurting out, because if I'm going to drive this thing, it's got to need fluid in it. Power on. Gradually getting the fuel in the filter. Yeah, I think you're right. So in here, yeah. Anywhere else, do you think? What about this? Over here? Over there? Yeah, okay, yeah, good. Yeah, so I've been consulting with Pumba, the workshop technician, and we're both of the same opinion that she was stuffed. So what I did was, on Pumba's advice, I took this off and I stuck a thing up there and I went psh, like that, and stuff came out through there, and apparently that's fixed it. I can't really explain, it's as technical as he got, but let's see if it works, eh? What do you reckon? You're right? Okay, I'll just put you over here. So a bit of this and that, and righto, well, I'm completely happy to say that I've got it running and can manage to get it to keep running until it doesn't. So it's a little bit hit and miss. It'll run, it'll go okay, and then it stops. And I can get it going sometimes it needs a little bit of a tickle. So I'm going to put it down to the fact there's probably just stuff in the carby. Okay, let's see what mystery surprise we get here. And yes, I'd already loosened it. Oh yeah, that's horrible. I might close that valve so I can sort of like... Yeah, that's just yucky. Oh well, it has to feel better with that out. It literally looks like just dirty water. Hopefully it hasn't got water floating on top of it. Well, this oil doesn't smell like fuel, but my goodness, it's thin. Like, it is, no, that's not as thin as it was. It was just watery thin. So I'd say that it's well and truly past its use by date. When I'm pulling this apart, I'm trying to locate the original loom and remove anything that's been added to it. Now this is interesting, I've never seen this before. The two wires, so got the wire from this one and the wire from this one, the thinner wires, and they've been sort of twisted together, but then there's a thicker wire here that's been twisted around it to hold it together. And then it had some heat shrink over it as well. You know, this here, quite an effective method. That's very strong. I haven't seen that before. I think that's actually quite ingenious. I'm going to cut it out. Got the wheels back on. Just been playing around with the transmission. Let's get some light on the subject. So I haven't got a speedo cable, as I said earlier. So I just made up a blanking plate found a bolt to go in that holds the speedo cable in, and I cut a piece of rubber. So it's just sitting there. I haven't tested it. It's got pretty good pressure on it, so hopefully that's just enough to stop the fluid from coming out the speedo cable. I presume if any comes out, it'll only be a splash anyway. I can't imagine it's under pressure. Well, I'm pretty sure it's not under pressure. So I did find the fittings for my radiator for the transmission cooler component. So I'm going to connect the pipes. Now I've got this whole wrangled mess of pipes, rubber, metal, goes through here, more rubber over to metal. So I figure I'm not going to use that if I can avoid it. I might as well make some pipes now that are going to be there for the long run. So luckily it's got all the various fittings, and I should have the tools to flare that, I think. But I also have some old pipes here that I made for Turbo 400 for Toxic. So I'll see if any of these fittings fit, and since the car's a pretty similar length, I may be able to just bend them. This end, or one of the ends, on this one, on the International, it's just using rubber hose fittings. So I think what I'll do is, if I can get something to fit into the transmission end, rebend it accordingly through wherever it needs to go, and then hopefully it's long enough that I can just cut it. I might just put a little bit of a flare in the end of it to stop that rubber hose coming off, and then rubber hose it. Sounds easy, right? That's how it goes. Okay, stripped out this cobbled piece of rubbish. Of course I'm going to keep the fittings, and I might even keep some of the pipe, because you never know what you need when you need it. But this is the other pipes, the shiny new ones, and the first thing I've checked is, are the fittings the same? Yes. So I can bend that pipe to any shape I want, but the important part is that the fittings that I've got on there will fit into there, so my plan should work as long as the pipes are long enough, and I reckon they will be. I have no concerns. Excellent. Righto. Well, there's a barbecue ready, and my dinner is waiting for me, so we'll get back to this after that. Okay, nothing flash, but got those pipes in. They probably took me longer than they should have. Got them cable tied together, trying to keep it away from the exhaust, so see how the cable ties go. Got a piece of heater hose just there, just to stop them rubbing on the cross member. And here we go, this comes up to the front, rubber hose and rubber hose. I was able to reuse the rubber hose that was on the old pipes. They're not fabulous, but they do the job. When I started building the Inter, and I've said this before, I wanted to keep it simple. I wanted to use as many Holton parts as I could so that I could just buy parts. So one thing I did, and I have said this before, is I put a column shift auto column in it to connect up to the transmission. The problem is the transmission that is in this is from a later model car, same transmission, but the shift is on the opposite side. So none of the linkages that I had that I was going to adapt to this worked. So I've been thinking, do I change the transmission? Seems pretty extreme. Or do I sort something else out? So I've decided I'm going to try and sort something else out. So this is the bottom of the column. And so this is where the shift linkages would go to shift the auto. But normally the shift would be on this side, same side as the column. But on my car, the shift on the transmission is on the opposite side of the car. So as I said, it's not going to work. So I think I'm going to go for cable. You can get kits, well, part of kits to bolt stuff to the side of the transmission pan and this, that and the other and make it all work. Well, I've got a cable. I think it's probably a generic one. I don't know what it's off, but I've got a cable and I've got a mount. And I suspect it's off a Turbo 400. Just that's the only thing I could think that I would have it from. I've had it for a while. I can't remember where I got it. Cable all works fine. So I reckon that I can use this and make up my own bracket that bolts onto the side of the pan to suit this Trimatic transmission. So make up basically the equivalent of this. This one might work, might not, but it'll be something to clone from, I guess. Can't be too hard. I've got a welder and I've got steel. So you get that. And then I've got to somehow work out how to make this end work with this. So what I'm thinking is to either put a mount on the firewall somewhere. Still got to finish welding all this up from when I did that. Put a mount on the firewall somewhere or down in the tunnel that I can brace the cable so it can pull backwards and forwards, or maybe even make a mount that mounts onto the bottom of the column to do that. Because what I need to do is hold the end of the cable in place, the outer sheath, so that the inner part can move backwards and forwards. So, because if it's not mounted, then it's not going to stay in place, is it? So what I need is to make it so that I can move that backwards and forwards. Now it shouldn't, making the mount up this end, okay, I've got to work that out. The other end, it shouldn't be too hard to actually mount it. It'll be the ratio, I think, of how high or far away or whatever the cable is from the shift mechanism on the side of the box. I need to get the leverage right, I guess is what I'm saying. So I'll try and work it out. There'll probably be some cardboard aided design here and a bit of head scratching, head knocking on the exhaust and frustration. We'll get there. So I'm under the car. This is the mechanism that I need to work with. So I can either use this plate or I'll probably take this nut off, make up my own arm there that I can easily adapt the end of the cable to, which would be this end. So something that I can just somehow get this thing happening, or an adaptation of that. And then this bracket here typically mounts onto the bottom of the pan, and then this is some adjustment to correct the throw and all that sort of stuff. So I'll pick up the bolts here, just scroll across the roads on their PA system. So I will pick up these bolts just here to mount a bracket. My exhaust is clearly very, very bent, so that'll be fixed, removed, replaced, whatever. So I need to make that mount that comes up from here and then somehow comes forward onto here so that I can get that throw backwards and forwards, so that I can go from park to neutral, reverse, drive, second and first. So I'll start off with that in the park position, and when I get to the column I'll start off with it in the park position so I don't go back to front on myself. I'm wondering whether I need to just bite the bullet and cut the end of this exhaust off, because it's going to need something doing to it anyway. I'll have a look at that. Well, sometimes you can just have really good luck. I actually went online and had a look at the pictures that I was looking at. It turns out that what I have in my hand is exactly what I need. Now, that wasn't set up. This just happened to be something I found in my stuff yesterday. So this bracket is exactly what I need. What I haven't got is the bit that needs to go onto the shifter here. So this has got holes at the right spacing, it's the right shape, and it's got two holes here. I moved it from here to here because I think it needs to sit up higher. I'm not sure if the little arm that I put on is meant to be up above the pan or pointing down on the kit that they do, so I'll play around with that because it doesn't really describe that in the picture, it just shows you the part. If I remember, I'll put a screenshot of that in here so that if you're doing something like this you can see what you need. I think it's a B&M part, but other companies seem to do them as well. And then the cable, I guess the cable's the cable. Just as long as it mounts on here, I don't think it matters what cable you use, as long as it's long enough and it's got the fittings to make it work. So, I'm going to cut this exhaust off because it's bent and it's in the way. And then I will take off these two pan bolts, put that up there so I can start working out the throw. I'm not going to say it, but well, I will. Shouldn't be too hard. Might be my lucky day. Found the shifter cable, found that it worked. Tried to use my angle grinder, couldn't get through there. My recipro hasn't been working for months. Thought, I wonder if I pick it up it'll work. Guess what? It worked, which was good. So that's two. So got some access. Let's see if I can get this happening, eh? I won't show you through the whole thing, but what we have is the bracket, and it'll come under there like that. So this is what I mean, once it's mounted, this is down lower. The cable is down lower than the pan. So I could probably, whatever I make, flip it so it's upside down here. Obviously the exhaust will need to be moved out of the way, so that it's actually working below the pan, or I could extend it up, so I could either have it as a push, or I could have it as a pull. It's got a push-pull either way. I'm not sure which way it's meant to be. I'll work it out. As long as I can get enough movement out of this. This is the thing, I need to be able to get it in a position where there's enough leverage to be able to move that. I believe, that's my way of thinking. Let's have a look. We'll keep going. I'm going to make a bracket, or I'll call it a bracket, that comes down from here, out, and then down again. So I've moved this back down to the lower point, and I've also adjusted it halfway approximately. That way I've got adjustment fore and aft. And I've got this, so that's just sitting there. The exhaust's got to be good for something. I've got it sitting there just to hold it to the height. So I'll eventually put a hole in there that is that shape of the shaft, which is sort of like a double D shape. So I've got that about where I want it. And as you can see, the exhaust is in the way. And when it moves in, because it's got to move in probably 20-25 mil, so 3/4 of an inch to an inch, it's got to move across that way. So I've intentionally left this tab here long so that it so I can shorten it. I've got a mark just there, that is where I reckon I can cut it, and then this here will locate in there. Now there's a little pin that goes in there, this guy. So what will happen is that this guy here, focus, that guy there screws on the end of that cable, just there, and then that end of the pin goes through my little mechanism that I'm making here. So it'll come in from the other side, but it'll do that, and then that's what will move it backwards and forwards. So I'll cut it to length. I think there's enough meat left on there that I can drill a hole and get that to fit without it being too bulky. And I left that long because that's the design that I've seen, and I'll drill a couple of holes so it gives me various adjustments. I'll probably drill 3 holes. That way I can move this along to various points depending whether I need to just change the throw or something. So I think we're going okay. This will be sitting off from the case, so it won't be in the way. Looking at that, and I've got this length here, as I said earlier, to mimic how far the cable is out from here, so hopefully it shouldn't be kinked, should be on one flat plane. And I think I'm going to have to grab something and try and bend these pipes down out of the way. So I don't know how I'll go with that, but now that they're not attached to each other, I might be able to. I'll cut that, then I'll try and bend those. So I've got the bracket so far. You've seen how it goes. So transmission, this is where the mechanisms will go into. And I've put 3 holes there. They're 8mm, they're roughly in a straight line, but they're on an angle pointing up. That's because if I need to adjust the shaft back, the cable backwards and forwards, then I believe that angle, because I think this is going to need to sit on the transmission on an angle like that. So it'll just, as it goes through its throw, it'll stop the cable from bending out of shape too much. But this just goes in here like that. So as I said, the cable goes there, and on the back half there we have a hole that I can put a split pin through. Hopefully I'll be able to put a very thin washer there as well, but I don't think it'll be too much of an issue. So that should work okay, I think. Just got to get this hole in the right spot to the right shape. Okay, all being right, I've got this in the right place. So where that dot is centre punched, that will be the centre of my hole, and I've done it there so that I can get the nut on and then be able to get a socket onto the nut. So that's as low as I can have it, I believe. So I'm going to drill the hole there and go from there. Now I've got it slightly canted, tilting forward. I've now got the car in, or the transmission in first gear, or low. Again, I'm just duplicating the thing that I've seen online, and that seems to be slightly canted forward. And what I'll use as my template is that. I'll have to do it from the back. I'll drill a pilot hole and then I'll position that, and that will be the shape that I'll use. Okay, after a fair bit of walking backwards and forwards, I got it right. I didn't want to make the hole too big, I wanted to sneak up on it, and that's what I did. I'm very happy with the fit there. So you can see that is our product, and that slips in there. And I'll put a washer on it and a nut, and hopefully all will be good. And then this looks like it should be on the right plane. And if you look at where that cable is, it's going through the centre of those three holes. So I think I got that, the angle of the dangle here and here pretty right. I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself. I'm really happy with the way it's come up, but I can see I definitely need to move the exhaust, and I've said that lots of times now. We'll put a nut on there and we'll check the motion before I bend the exhaust. Righto, so I've got that in place. I managed to find a split pin, but I didn't have a washer thin enough to put on the back. So I'd like to try and pick up a really thin copper washer just to put there. Sometimes when you buy washers, the real cheap ones, they're super thin. That's what I was hoping to find. But anyway, it's not going to come out, because even when before I had the split pin in there, because it's on a really nice straight angle through here, the pin is such a nice fit into here that I don't think it'd fall out even if the split pin wasn't there. So let's have a look at it through its motion. A bit hard pulling the cable by hand, but so I've got it in the very front hole, so the furthermost one, and as you can see, the line of the cable is pretty much doesn't change. So I'm really happy with that. I can get through, it's really hard to move by hand, but it's I can get through the full range of motion there, and I think I've got the geometry right. So all I really need to do now is sort out the steering column part. Just looking at it, I reckon if I did this again, I could probably drop this whole part here down maybe 5 to 10 millimeters, because as it is at the moment, it's almost perfectly horizontal, if not going uphill just a tad. And then as I move it forward, it ends up a little bit further forward. It may make selecting second and low a little bit tighter than the others, but at the end of the day, who uses them anyway? So, so far I'm really happy with that. Time for a cup of coffee as a celebration. Okay, so this here is the shift part, This part here normally goes in that way and then has the linkages come out. So it's rubber bush there, it can rotate and the rods come out of that hole. So what I'm going to do in the first place, I'm going to try putting it in back to front, and I'll show you why. In my hand is the cable, so this is obviously the other end. So it's got this point here which I'll need to anchor onto a standoff off the firewall somewhere, but I want to aim this at that point where the shifter used to be. And the reason I want to do that, it's got this hole in it. So this is the end of the cable once again, and this is that piece. So what I'm thinking is I want to mount this to that end. So as I said, reverse this, it would normally go that way. Mount it to that end so that it still works through the same function on the steering column and all that sort of stuff. So what I'm thinking is to get a piece of thread and either tap or drill a hole in the end of this, mount that in there so that that sticks out the end, so I can then just attach that to it like that with a nut, spring washer, shims, all that sort of stuff. So I think what I'll do is literally just drill a hole through this. Let's get some light on the subject. Drill a hole through this, that's better. Put that in so that it sticks through like that, and I can either thread it in there, or if I want I could even drill it, no, not drill it, I could weld it from the back so that it stays in place, and then essentially I'll just have a threaded lug sticking out like that I can then do that. And then the only thing I have to do is create a standoff for this bracket here to mount that to the firewall so the outer sheath stays in place and the inner can go backwards and forwards. One thing at a time. Well, that took 3 minutes and 43 seconds. I know because that's what the camera told me. I won't tell a lie. I drilled the hole a little bit too big, so there's not a lot of thread contact, but you can see what I've got here. So that's no drama. It works at the moment, but I can weld that, or I guess if I wanted to get really fiddly, I could probably hold a nut in there and tighten it down into that. Almost curious to do that, see if I can do it. But anyway, I've got the concept here. That was almost too easy. Actually, if I tighten that right down, it can't go anywhere. So pretty happy with that. That thing that I've got to put on is the cable is only thin, but if I need to I can wind this out a bit. Good stuff. I tell you what, it takes longer to find nuts and bolts and things than it does to do the job. Tubs of nuts and bolts, never throw anything out. Found this, rusty, yep. And this part here that I'm actually using, that was actually a longer bolt or something or other that I cut the end off, and I thought I'll use that one day. Well, guess what, just wish I had the nuts for it. Anyway, I found a nut that'll get me out of trouble. I may end up even just drilling a hole through this and putting a split pin in it. Got that on there. Now what I need to do is just make a standoff here. I don't need to make it too complicated. I'm just going to use something like this, which is a piece of my shed that was left over, and I'm going to make it so that it just mounts to that plate, something like that. I'll make it smaller, make it more attractive. It'll do the job just fine. Put that plate there and I'll fix it off to those original holes or something like that. It'll probably never be seen again, probably never be removed again after I finish the build, but that should hold that in place, and then all I've got to do is hold that bracket to this plate. Got the floor plate put in, back in the same place that it was. I've only got 4 of the 6 screws in, and they're only tech screws. I'll go through and I'll replace that, tidy it up, maybe weld it, we'll see at some point. And then I've got a couple of tech screws just holding that plate in. I actually end up having to put the plate in the opposite way to the way I had it, so upside down, I guess. But it fitted nicely. And then down here, this is our shifter. So the mechanism we were working on before. It's handy having a hole in the floor. So when I go through the gears, I'm currently in park, so reverse, neutral, second, drive, first, so low, etc. It's hard to do it while I'm leaning over. It's all working. So this is the cable just here. Pretty happy with that. So I might need to adjust it a little bit, or I might not, but it works. I haven't had to adjust it at all at the moment, and it seems to be working. So I'll start the thing up and try and run it through the gears while it's running, and hopefully we won't have any dramas. So that's it there. Park, reverse, neutral, drive, second, low. Seems to want to go from drive down to first or something quite easily, so that might be an adjustment thing. And I'll quickly show you under the bonnet, if there were a bonnet. So that bracket just there, that's where we're looking. There you can see all that stuff that I discussed. Seems to work all right. Might actually get my wife to shift it through the gears so I can just make sure that it looks like it's not binding up anywhere. I might need to just tweak it a little bit, and I'm happy with that. Okay, take two. This is why you just temporarily put things together. I've now flipped this up the other way, and I'm going to extend this up to hold the cable up there. Why? Because it was working in reverse. When I had it in park, it was in first, and vice versa. Why? Because normally it shifts from up the top here. Well, I flipped it down the bottom, thinking that was the way it needed to go, and that wasn't really the go. So, I don't know. Maybe there's some other way I could do it, but in the short term, probably in the long term, I'm just going to get a piece of angle iron, extend it up here, angle iron so that it's got strength, put it up to there, and hopefully it'll just work the way that it's meant to, rather than in reverse. So I'll cut that, drill some holes, and I'll have a look, see if it works. After a lot of changes to my setup, I did get it going. I'll go through that in detail in a little while. But this here is just a cobbled together thing that is going in the top here. So you remember I had the rubber bush there before and the whole setup. Because I've now got it proof of concept working, I'm just putting that in there, and then the cable will just clip on top of the pin. So I took that threaded nut out, figured it wasn't necessary, and I have just made it so that I can put a couple of washers on it. So there'll be a washer, then the cable will go on, and another washer, and then a split pin will go through it, and that will be enough to hold it all together. So I just welded, that's just a piece of round rod that I welded in there. It's not particularly beautiful in any way, but it'll do the job. It's not really going to be seen, all those parts where the holes are, but they really don't matter. I just figured rather than have loose rubber bushings and things there, I'd go through that process. So I'm just about to weld that to there. Let's see what I can work out with this. This is a HQJX, something like that, accelerator pedal, and it's got the kick down switch on it there as well, so when you hit the big ones, then it kicks the transmission back, so I want to incorporate that into it. And it's a standard Holden setup, so I want to try and use that to go with the rest of the relatively standard Holden setup that I've got mechanically. What I have though is an issue. Of course, because it's a modified car. And the issue I have is that the angle of the floor, so it comes along flat, goes up on about a 45-degree angle, and then it's flat again. When I try and find a place to put this pedal, which obviously it needs to sit beside the brake pedal, traditionally they sit lower than the brake pedal. When I do that, I've got interference on the firewall with the top of the pedal. I can make a mount for the middle part, but it's sitting higher than the brake pedal, and it doesn't allow me any swing on it at the moment. So I'm just trying to work out some angles. So what I've done is, in a very rudimentary way, I have drawn up representation. So this is the side view. So imagine the pedal would go like this. So this is my floor, this is the firewall, and then it changes and goes up there. So I think it's relatively a 90-degree angle from that point to the floor. Not that that matters. I just used my sliding bevel to transfer the appropriate angles where they needed to be from the cab to the board. This is my brake pedal. So it sits out from the floor about 110 mil, or a bit over 4 inches. And what I want to do is get it so that my throttle pedal is either level at the top with the brake pedal, so this point, or slightly higher, and I want it to be either sitting on the same plane as it at the front or slightly back. So that's normal. So what I need to try and do, so my conundrum is that just about all of this mechanism is in my engine bay, because this is my firewall. So as it is, it's not even close to fitting. So what I'm thinking of doing, and I won't explain the whole thought process here, I'm thinking of cutting the pedal just here so that I can mount this something like that, where it'll clear up here. Probably need to change the angle of that mount a little bit, and without changing the ratio, I hope, without changing the ratio of the top of the bottom to the bottom of the pedal, I'm thinking of just cutting this and moving it back this way so that I've got enough clearance. I've still got the same amount of leverage, and the kickdown still works. Now that'll either work, or once I've done it, I'll discover that, hey, that wasn't going to work. The only way I can find out, I guess, is to cut it. Let's cut. I took it a step further, and I've mounted the pedal to this block of wood, so that indicates the firewall. Now what I've worked out is that on my Chev, from the cable starting point to the time it's fully accelerated, there's only about 35 mil of travel. So because I want to allow for underlay, carpet and all that sort of stuff, I've allowed about 55 mil from the time that it will kick, from the time that nothing to the time that it'll be full acceleration. So I'm hoping that's plenty of travel. Theoretically it should be. And I measured on the carby, there appears to be about 40 mil of travel on the carby. So should be pretty good. I think I will be okay. What I don't want to do is limit how much travel I've got. Now the other thing I was trying to work out was, where will the cable come through? So this is where the cable goes into the pedal. So I've just got it at a 90-degree angle to the firewall, and when I depress the pedal, it travels nicely along the pedal without changing angle. So roughly speaking, that's where the hole will be in my firewall, which is down about half an inch, 15 mil from where it changes direction, which is not the ideal spot because it can be a bit fiddly to play in that area, but I can live with that. But what I've also discovered is that it's right in the interference area. Basically my cable is going to come out underneath the booster, underneath the inner guard, between the inner guard and another layer of the guard on the inside, where there's brackets and all sorts of things. So it probably couldn't be a more complicated area. It couldn't have just been on a flat part of the firewall, could it? So I've given up trying to plan too much of where that's going to come through. I'm just going to suck it up and see. So what I'm going to do is just mount it an appropriate distance away from the brake pedal, which I'll work that out. And then once it's there, then I'll just cut holes and stuff until I can get a cable through there. I can overthink it. It's probably going to change from the time I do this to the time there. So I'll just try and get the angle of the pedal right at this point in time, and I'll worry about problem 2 afterwards. I just made a little pie cut here. Just bend it down a bit. You can see how much I've bent it, and it's made a dramatic difference. So as it is at the moment, if I get the pedal, I reckon about there, angle's a bit hard, about there I appear to have clearance between the firewall, carpet and all that sort of stuff. I've got about enough travel there, I believe, before I hit the kick down. And the pedal, I've just taken this spring off here, but the pedal is just sitting slightly proud of the brake pedal, and I suspect that once it's all said and done, it'll probably sit a little bit lower. Now what I can do is I can go through the full travel, hit my kick down as far as I can, and my pedal doesn't hit the firewall. The back of the lever doesn't hit the firewall. Okay, there will be carpet, so I might just push it forward just a little bit, I think. So make a minor tweaking adjustment. Go right the way through, and that's what we've got there. So if need be, I'll tweak it a little bit more. In fact, I'm going to. And there'll probably be some minor adjustments along the way. Okay, that's much better. So that's full rev, getting a good sweep. And as it sits there, the throttle pedal is sitting slightly higher than the brake, but when you're accelerating, then it's going to be down here. And I guess if I just need to slip my foot across, I don't like brake pedals being higher than my accelerator pedal. It means you've got to lift your foot up to put your foot on the brake. I prefer to slide my foot across to put on the brake. So I'm not going to finalise this. I'm just going to weld a little tab from here to here, just with some tacks, so that I can make any adjustments if need be. But I reckon that looks pretty good, and I haven't changed the ratio at all. You can see that because I haven't cut this, so it should work the way it was always meant to, just on a different angle. Fingers crossed it is that easy. I guess the thing to do now is to give it a test fit. Looks okay to me so far. Well, I've heard it said that you shouldn't expose your mistakes on YouTube because it's not a good look. Well, if I didn't expose my mistakes on YouTube, I wouldn't have any content. Geez, I do some stupid things. So, what did I do? Well, the distance from my floor to the change of direction where the firewall was 300 mil. Well, for some unbeknown reason, I marked it out at 380 mil on my thing. So clearly, once I assembled my pedal, absolutely nothing was even close to fitting. So this fat black line is actually my firewall. I've got the pedal mounted where I had it. Now I think the cut that I've done will still work. So what do you do when you mess something up? Just recoup and keep going. So I've got my pedal there. Travel still works. Floor seems okay. All that sort of stuff. I can get that much. What I need to do is change the angle of this. I don't think it's going to change the ratio. I don't think it's going to change the geometry, just the shape. That's my logic. So I'm going to cut it there, and I'm going to tilt that forward far enough so that I can get full travel. So as it is at the moment, that is as flat out, and that is in where I want it to be, in resting position. So I'm going to cut this here, bring that forward. I'll double check that, just make sure I'm cutting it far enough down. Bring it forward, and then once I've done that, I'll weld it back together like this, tack it, and then I'm going to have to reinstall this guy in the right place. And I think, because I can just use the same bolt, same pivot and all the rest of it, so length shouldn't change, Maybe it will. Thinking about that, it probably will. And then I'll have to just make it so that it stays in place. Bear with me. So we interrupt this usual program to bring you a bit of insanity. I've just been listening to Psycho Killer by Talking Heads, which I think is appropriate considering the way I'm going. You can probably hear the cicadas. If you can't, turn your volume up. Now, on this Sydney blue gum here, you may see all those black spots. They're all black prints. Oh, I think they're black prints. They're all cicadas. There's gazillions of them. And if you're familiar with cicadas, when you go underneath the tree, you get a little shower. And it's not the type that you want, quite frankly. They are absolutely everywhere. Welcome to the bush in Australia. We will now resume our regular program. My goodness, look, they're all over Dotty. I'm almost too scared to unbolt this and put it on the truck. Okay, what do we got? Pedal is in the right place. What I've worked out is I want this to finish parallel with the firewall. And what I think I've also worked out is that these things work best when they're parallel to each other. So, what do we got? If I go from there, swing through there, then I've got that parallel to the floor. I think I've got enough travel, and I've managed to get it so that it's all within the firewall, and the kickdown seems to work fully. I had to rotate this around. I ended up cutting this here, cutting this, and I almost put the original cut back to where it was. All just tacked at the moment. Let's see what it's like in the truck. Well, it was an epic journey, but I think we're there. So what do I have? Let's move the light. What do I have? I want the top of the throttle pedal to be about level with the brake pedal, and I want it to be sort of centered to the position between the brake pedal and the kick panel. I actually like to rest my foot on the kick panel when I'm just cruising along and have my heel on the floor and just sort of pivot between the throttle and the brake as I need to. So I think I'll be able to rest on there. This is the handbrake right in front of me here, so hopefully it doesn't get in my foot way, but it is what it is. Pretty cool handbrake, the original. So that's that. Now, the win out of this is that the point where it's going to go into the firewall, the cable up the top there, that's a screwdriver sticking through the wall just below it. It's in a much nicer place. So you can see just above the top left hand corner of where the cable goes, there's a swage line, and below it is the screwdriver. So let's have a look at that. That's the screwdriver, and that's the swage line. So it looks like a really nice place to be able to get a cable through beside the booster. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to drill a hole from this side, because if I line up, that's about the point there that I want it to be. I'm going to drill a hole through there, and that is where I'm going to aim for my cable to come out. And that way, when the cable comes, I can go onto here, tuck it around here, and whooshka into the motor. So I guess my snafu of messing it all up in the first place, in the long run, has turned out alright, because that's a much nicer place to bring a cable out than down in there somewhere. I think I'm winning. I drilled a hole about the height that I reckon, and I got it as close to the booster as I could, but still allowing enough room for a cable to come through. So, because what I don't want is it coming out the back of the booster and then trying to go around the corner. It's not going to make flowing easily. So I drilled the hole, and then I've just got a piece of welding rod in there, and I've got it popping out in this side. So that's the welding rod up the top there, just there. And then I can fit where the cable goes over that and check out the position of the pedal. And what I'm seeing is that it's too close to the kick panel. I would like it to be across about probably another 20 mil. So I'm going to keep it pretty simple. What I'm going to do is get that tab at the top of the pedal and bend it so it's facing the opposite direction. And I think that's all I need to do. All welded up, so I V-jointed all of the places where I'd done the pie cuts, so ground it out and then welded it, and then I've grounded it flat, grinded it flat, whatever, ground it flat, and that's the part flipped over. I just cleaned off a bit of metal on the top here. It wasn't contacting, but I really didn't want it to contact, so I don't really need a stuck throttle at some point in time. So that all goes through its cycle without any contact. So that should put the cable into a better position, I believe. So let's have a look. Okay, got the throttle cable in, and I have to say it was ridiculously straightforward, except for the fact me getting underneath the dash is like a giraffe trying to do limbo. So I managed to get that on. It's a standard Holden throttle cable on a standard or modified Holden pedal on a carby. So standard with a little bit of modification. Got to start this thing, put it in reverse, and see if it'll go out there. And it's idling really fast because I've got to sort the carby out, but hopefully I've got a throttle that I can tap and rev as well. So you'll find out when I do. Fire in the hole! Or not. Fire in the hole! Really? Let me use my throttle pedal. If only my arms and legs were longer.
It smells.
You saw it here first. Dear oh dear, what's all the smoke from? Oh my goodness. What's going on? Oh no. What have I done? I'm in trouble.